Hi, welcome to CUTV. I'm here with Elizabeth May at Concordia, and just like to ask you a couple questions. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, I'm very glad to talk to you.
I was wondering, so you were talking a lot about the problem with getting young people involved. How do you think that we could ameliorate the situation?
Well, it's not a criticism of a younger generation at all. I mean, when you look at the statistics, and a lot of people have done this research in public policy, young people are much more likely than my generation to be very engaged with non-government organizations, very engaged in movements. Certainly, Quebec youth are more engaged in movements, evidently, than some of the non-Quebec youth. So the challenge is to make the political process relevant to engaged, politically aware youth. And that requires, which I believe to be absolutely the case, proving to others that how you vote matters and that voting matters, and that we wouldn't get the kind of government we have now if even half the youth who chose not to vote had voted last time. We'd have a different government. We wouldn't have a conservative majority. We'd have better climate policies. So it's a matter of, it's not that there's something wrong with youth necessarily. The picture that's wrong is the irrelevancy of a political process and the fact that there's a deliberate effort from the spin doctors in the conservative war room to convince people that they know won't vote for them to not vote at all. Mm-hmm. So if you decide you're not going to vote, you've just rewarded the strategists who are working for Stephen Harper who do not want youth voting.
So it's not really that young people are politically inactive, it's that there's not much confidence in the voting system, perhaps?
Well, exactly. In the first past the post system, a lot of people can feel their vote doesn't count, so there's a sense that the vote isn't effective. Mm-hmm. And then there's the general sense, if you watch Question Period and you think, well, these guys are just acting like idiots, then you don't feel like, I want my own idiot in there. You have to recognize, look, we could actually fix this system if we had, for instance, get out and vote Green. Mm-hmm. You may not get a Green elected in your own riding, but at least you know you've made a statement. You've said something clear with your ballot. Or get out, if you think the vote's going to be close between parties that you like or don't like, get out and vote for who you think will be the best MP. Or, to the Assemblée Nationale. Voting really matters. And that's something that, we talk about voter suppression techniques like robocalls. Making Parliament unpleasant, making politics hyper-partisan is also part and parcel of voter suppression because they do not want, I promise you, the Conservatives do not want youth voting. There's a reason a Conservative worker ran into the University of Guelph and tried to steal the ballot box on the special vote in the election in 2011. They do not want youth voting.
I was unaware of that, so if you forgive me.
Yes, and the returning officer managed to stop him, and those ballots were counted. The Conservative Party objected to the returning officer at Guelph allowing there to be a special voting day so that youth would have a chance to vote, even though it was in the middle of exams with a May 2nd election. So we also need to work ahead of time on campuses to say, we want our opportunity to vote. We never know when the next federal election will be, but we want to be able to have voting stations on campus. We don't want them moving around at the last minute so no one knows where they are. Mm-hmm. The new voting laws that Stephen Harper's brought in that require a photo ID with an address and proof of where you live, all of these things prejudice certain groups and make it harder for them to vote. Certainly it prejudices the homeless, mm-hmm. prejudices First Nations, and it doesn't work for youth. Those are deliberate choices.
Yeah, no, I remember last year during the Maple Spring and everything, we tried to get elections to be done also in schools, and the former Liberal Party was very much against it. So I also wanted to ask you what you think about, you were talking earlier about the media and the impression that it gives to Canadians about, the environment, about the politicians and all these things.
Well, our news media, compared to 30, 40 years ago, is owned by a handful of people. And that handful, I mean, if you look at the Globe and Mail and CTV are both owned by Bell Media. Mm-hmm. And Bell Media is a corporation whose primary purpose is profits and not dissemination of news or public information. Not that they're a bad company, but they're going to be looking at their bottom line, and their bottom line may be better with Stephen Harper. Certainly the policies and the way that the news is covered is affected by the owner's views. Global is owned by Shaw. The Post Media, 43 newspapers across Canada, are all owned by one person, one corporation. And the French language media, with the exception of a great paper like Le Devoir, I mean, we have you have a very small number of corporations controlling everything Canadians receive in terms of news. And newsrooms are way smaller than they used to be. There's fewer reporters, smaller budgets. They're not running out. They don't have specialized environment reporters the way they used to in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Every newspaper, every TV network had a reporter who was an expert on environmental issues and covered them as an expert. Those people aren't there anymore because the budgets are tighter. So we need a lot of citizen awareness to demand better from mainstream media. I know a lot of people just reject it and go online to find their news. But people who are well informed need to help the rest of us inform the rest of Canada by actually paying attention to the websites for things like Post Media, CBC, CTV, Radio-Canada, TVA, and get the word out.
The Green Party was responsible for a lot of the amendments to Bill 38. So I was just wondering where you think this is headed with the Idle No More movement. I mean, can we be optimistic, or?
Well, we need to. I'm optimistic about Idle No More because it's something as was the student movement here in Quebec. The more that Canadians, as citizens, shake off apathy and get engaged in citizen action, the better off we all will be. So I'm encouraged by that. In terms of what happens, as long as Stephen Harper is Prime Minister, we will see the strategy in Parliament of might makes right, and bills will be pushed through. I'm afraid that the budget is coming down this week, and then I'm afraid there'll be another omnibus bill. This time I think we'll lose the Species at Risk Act. So we have to be prepared, and we have to push back as hard as possible. But we need much more, if there were more demonstrations on the streets while we're working inside Parliament, it would help.
All right, well, I know you have a lot to get to, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.